Have you ever felt like you're only as worthy as the last person who responded to your message? Like your entire self-esteem rises and falls, with a seen but not replied, with a post that gets no likes, with silence that feels like punishment? We don't talk about this, but deep down you know it's true. You refresh, you wait, you wonder what you did wrong. And strangely, the moment you stop trying so hard to be seen is the moment everything begins to change. Not because you stop caring about life, but because you stop caring in a way that breaks your soul. This video isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming real, about discovering what happens when you finally stop performing for an audience that was never really watching. There comes a moment in your life when exhaustion no longer feels physical. You're not tired because you worked late. You're tired because you've been performing, smiling when you're sad, agreeing when you want to say no, laughing at things that don't make you feel anything at all. You're not tired of life. You're tired of wearing a mask every single day, hoping someone will finally approve of the version of you that isn't even real. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. The persona isn't just who we pretend to be. It's who we think we need to be to deserve love. And over time, the mask becomes the prison. Because when everything you do is for the sake of being liked, you slowly disappear. What's left is an echo of someone who used to feel, used to dream, used to know what they believed. You start measuring your worth by external metrics. Comments, likes, replies, invitations, approval from people who barely know you. But here's the question that cuts through everything. What happens when the only thing left holding your life together is your fear of being misunderstood? That's where most people live, right at the edge of collapse, but too afraid to let go. Because letting go feels like giving up. But what if letting go is actually waking up? Let's be honest about something we all do, but never admit. You type the message, then delete it, then retype it, then delete it again. Not because it was wrong, not because it didn't make sense, but because you're afraid it might make them uncomfortable, afraid it might sound too much, afraid it might reveal too much of who you actually are underneath the carefully curated version you've spent years perfecting. You post something honest online, something real, something vulnerable, something true, and when no one reacts, you feel this quiet shame creeping in. Like maybe you said too much. Maybe you shouldn't have felt that way in the first place. Maybe your emotions are too intense, your thoughts too complicated, your truth too inconvenient. You say yes to plans you don't want. You hold back opinions in meetings. You laugh at jokes that feel hollow. You agree to help when you're already overwhelmed. You pretend to be interested in conversations that drain your energy. And each time you do it, a tiny part of you whispers, "Is this really me?" But you silence it, because being accepted still feels safer than being real. Because disappointing others feels worse than betraying yourself. Because the fear of rejection has become stronger than your desire for authentic connection. Pause here and take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? Let me tell you about Sarah. She's 28, works in marketing, lives alone in a city where she knows hundreds of people but feels genuinely close to none of them. Sarah has perfected the art of being likable. She remembers everyone's birthdays. She never complains, even when she's struggling. She always says the right thing at the right time. She's the person people call when they need something, when they need a favor, when they need someone reliable. Her coworkers love her because she never rocks the boat. Her friends think she has it all together because she never asks for help. Her family thinks she's the easy one because she never causes drama. But Sarah spends her evenings scrolling through social media, feeling empty. She goes to parties and laughs at all the right moments, but drives home feeling more alone than when she arrived. She has conversations that last for hours, but leave her feeling like no one really knows her. Because Sarah has spent so long being what others needed her to be, she's forgotten who she actually is underneath it all. She's forgotten what she actually likes, what she actually wants, what she actually believes. She's become so good at reading the room that she's lost touch with her own inner compass. Where does this come from? This need to please? This urge to perform? This obsession with being seen in the right way, for most of us, it starts young. You were probably the quiet one, the easy child, the one who learned early that love was conditional, given when you behaved, when you smiled, when you didn't make too much noise, when you didn't ask for too much. You were praised for being low maintenance, for not being needy, for being mature beyond your years. And you were punished, sometimes obviously, sometimes silently, when you asked for more than people could handle. Maybe your parents were overwhelmed, struggling with their own unhealed wounds. Maybe your teachers rewarded compliance over creativity. Maybe your friends preferred you when you agreed with them rather than when you challenged them. So you became good at disappearing. Not physically, emotionally. You learned to read the room before you entered it, to gauge the mood before you spoke, to sense what people needed from you and provide it, even at the expense of your own needs. You shrunk your needs. You filtered your truth. You learned that being liked was more important than being whole, that being wanted was more important than being authentic, that being chosen was more important than choosing yourself. But here's the cost nobody talks about. The more you adjust yourself to be loved, the less you feel love when it arrives. Because deep down you know, they're not loving you. They're loving your performance. They're loving the version of you that makes them comfortable, that doesn't challenge them, that fits neatly into their expectations. And that performance is exhausting. It's soul-crushing. It's a slow form of self-abandonment that leaves you feeling hollow even when you're surrounded by people. You didn't just become a people pleaser. You became a shapeshifter, someone who changes based on who's in the room. And now you're tired of being unrecognizable to yourself. Jung called this living from the shadow, not the dark, evil shadow we imagine in movies, but the shadow of our unlived life. All the parts of ourselves we've pushed away because they didn't fit the image we thought would keep us safe. The persona isn't just a mask you wear. It's the silence you keep. The version of you who survives by saying less, needing less, being less, just to be allowed to stay. It's the part of you that has learned to make yourself small in exchange for acceptance. And ironically, you're still afraid you'll be left behind. Even after all that shrinking, all that performing, all that self-betrayal, the fear remains. Because deep down, you know that relationships built on performance aren't really relationships at all. But here's the truth. You've already been left by yourself. The person you're most afraid of losing is you. There comes a moment where the pain of pretending finally outweighs the fear of being misunderstood. It's different for everyone. For some, it's a quiet Tuesday morning when you realize you don't even know what you want for breakfast because you've spent so long asking everyone else what they want, accommodating everyone else's preferences, that you've lost touch with your own. For others, it's the moment you catch yourself apologizing for having feelings, for taking up space, for existing in a way that might inconvenience someone else for even a moment. For Sarah, it was sitting in her car after another work event, staring at herself in the rearview mirror and not recognizing the person looking back. She'd spent 2 hours making small talk about things she didn't care about, agreeing with opinions she didn't share, laughing at stories that bored her, pretending to be interested in conversations that felt like emotional quicksand. She looked tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix because it comes from living a life that isn't really yours, for wearing a mask that's become so heavy you can barely hold your head up anymore. And in that moment, something shifted. Something Jung would call the emergence of the authentic self, the moment when the true personality can no longer be suppressed. You stop. You stop chasing the reply. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't really listening anyway. You stop bending backwards to be enough for people who will never see you as enough anyway, because they're not looking for you. They're looking for a version of you that serves their needs. And at first, it's terrifying. The silence feels louder. The disconnection feels real. The fear that you've made a mistake, that you're being selfish, that you're throwing away relationships that matter, that you're becoming the kind of person you were taught was bad or wrong or unlovable. But then something strange happens. Something beautiful and frightening and liberating all at once. You breathe, fully, for the first time in years. You say what you mean, And you don't immediately follow it with an apology or an explanation or a justification for why you dare to have an opinion. You express without editing. You feel without filtering. You exist without performing. And instead of the rejection you feared, instead of the abandonment you were so sure would come, you feel relief. Not because everyone claps, not because the world suddenly understands you, not because you immediately find the perfect people who appreciate exactly who you are, but because you finally showed up as you, the real you, the unedited you, the you that exists when no one is watching, when there's no audience to please, when there's no performance to maintain. And even if no one else noticed, you noticed. You felt it in your chest, in your bones, in the deepest part of yourself. That still, calm knowing, I didn't betray myself today. The next week, when Sarah's coworker made a joke at someone else's expense, the kind of cruel, casual comment she'd always laughed at to fit in, to be part of the group, she didn't laugh. She didn't make a scene, didn't deliver a lecture, didn't try to change anyone's mind. But she didn't participate in something that felt wrong to her soul. When her friend called asking her to work for free on another project, something Sarah had always said yes to because she was afraid of seeming difficult or unsupportive, she said no, not with 1,000 excuses or apologies, not with elaborate explanations of why she couldn't. Just, I'm not available for that right now. When her date asked what she wanted to do, instead of the automatic, I don't care, what do you want, that had become her default response to almost everything, she actually said what she wanted. I'd love to try that new bookstore downtown and then get coffee somewhere quiet where we can actually talk. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. Some people were surprised. A few seemed disappointed. One friend made a comment about her changing that stung for a moment, that brought up all the old fears about being too much, too difficult, too demanding. But Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Aligned. Like her actions and her inner truth were finally moving in the same direction. Like she was finally living her own life instead of performing someone else's version of what her life should look like. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror, like someone is speaking directly to the part of you that's been waiting to be seen. You thought it was your fault people didn't stay. You thought you weren't enough, weren't interesting enough, weren't worthy enough of love and connection and belonging. But it was never about that. It was never about your fundamental worth as a human being. You were building relationships on a foundation of silence, not truth. On performance, not presence. On who you thought they wanted you to be, not who you actually are underneath all the conditioning and expectations. Because when you live by what you haven't dared to name, your real thoughts, your real feelings, your real needs, your real dreams and fears and desires, your choices aren't really yours. They belong to the shadow you've been too afraid to see, too afraid to integrate, too afraid to accept as part of who you are. Jung taught us that the shadow isn't our enemy. It's our unintegrated self. It's every emotion we've labeled as too much, every opinion we've deemed too risky, every need we've decided is too selfish, every part of our personality we've pushed away because it didn't fit the image we thought would keep us safe. But individuation, Jung's term for the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from collective expectations and inherited patterns, requires befriending your shadow. Not indulging every impulse, not becoming selfish or cruel or inconsiderate, but acknowledging and integrating the parts of yourself you've rejected. The shadow is where your power lives. Your creativity, your authentic voice, your capacity for genuine connection, your ability to set boundaries, your right to take up space, your permission to have preferences, opinions, needs that matter just as much as everyone else's. You were never too much. You were simply edited to fit into rooms that only loved your silence. You were compressed to fit into spaces that were too small for your full humanity, your complete personality, your whole self. And now, you're finally done living on mute. The transcendent function, Jung's concept for the bridge between conscious and unconscious, between who we think we should be and who we actually are, happens when we stop rejecting parts of ourselves and start integrating them. It's not about becoming selfish. It's about becoming whole. It's not about not caring about others. It's about also caring about yourself with the same energy you've always given to everyone else. Because when you're whole, you can love from fullness instead of emptiness. You can give from choice instead of compulsion. You can connect from authenticity instead of desperation. You can finally rest in your own presence instead of constantly seeking validation from others who may not even really know you. So what does it actually look like to stop caring? Not in a cynical way where you become cold and disconnected and treat people badly because you're hurt or angry or defensive, but in the liberated way where you care about what actually matters and let go of what doesn't serve your highest good or your authentic self. It looks like letting go of the need to impress people who don't really know you, who aren't invested in your growth, who prefer the smaller version of you because it makes them more comfortable. It looks like showing up to work as yourself, not the version of yourself you think will get promoted, but the version that can do good work while maintaining your integrity and your boundaries. It looks like letting a text go unanswered for a few hours, or even a day, without spiraling into anxiety about what the other person might think, without creating elaborate stories about how they must hate you now. It looks like telling someone, "I'm not available right now," without offering 1,000 excuses or apologies or justifications for why you have boundaries, why you have needs, why you're a human being with limitations. It's emotional detachment, not from love, but from approval addiction, not from caring, but from the desperate need to be seen as perfect by people whose opinions shouldn't determine your worth. You don't stop caring about people. You stop caring about being approved of by people who don't really see you, who aren't interested in knowing the real you, who prefer the performance to the person. There's a difference. One is rooted in genuine connection and love and mutual respect. The other is rooted in fear and control and the exhausting need to manage other people's perceptions of you. And when you drop the control, when you stop trying to manage how everyone sees you, when you stop performing for approval, you start to feel peace again. You walk into rooms not hoping to be chosen, but knowing you belong there, whether they recognize it or not, whether they appreciate you or not, whether they understand you or not. You stop trying to be everyone's favorite and start focusing on being your own advocate, your own anchor, your own source of approval and validation. 6 months after that night in her car, Sarah's life looked different. Not dramatically. She still had the same job, the same apartment, many of the same people in her life. But something fundamental had shifted, something that couldn't be seen from the outside, but was transformative from the inside. She lost a few friends. The ones who only liked her when she was accommodating, when she said yes to everything, when she made herself small for their comfort, when she played the role of the supportive friend without ever asking for support in return. And at first, that hurt. It felt like confirmation of her worst fears, that the real her wasn't lovable, that authentic people end up alone, that vulnerability is punished rather than rewarded. But she'd also deepened relationships with people who appreciated her honesty, who respected her boundaries, who actually seemed to like her more when she was real rather than when she was performing, who were relieved that she'd given them permission to be real too. She'd stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes, stopped refreshing social media, looking for validation that never quite satisfied anyway, stopped saying yes to things that drained her energy just because she was afraid of seeming difficult or high maintenance. She started painting again, something she'd abandoned years ago because it felt impractical and didn't serve any purpose except bringing her joy, helping her process emotions, connecting her to something deeper than productivity and achievement. She joined a hiking group, not because she thought she should network or because someone told her she needed more hobbies, but because she genuinely wanted to spend time in nature with people who shared that interest. She started reading books that actually interested her, instead of books she thought would make her seem intelligent or cultured or sophisticated to other people. She started cooking meals she actually wanted to eat instead of whatever was easiest or cheapest or most Instagram-worthy. Most importantly, she stopped feeling exhausted by her own life. She stopped feeling like a stranger in her own skin, like an actor in a play she never auditioned for. Not everyone will like the real you, but that's the point. That's not a bug, it's a feature. It's how you know you're finally being authentic. Because for the first time, you're not living for everyone. You're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're living for the one person you abandoned the most along the way. Take a moment to breathe. How would your life change if you stopped needing to prove your worth to people who don't really see you? What would become possible if you trusted that you're already enough? This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, separate from collective expectations and inherited patterns. It's the journey from living unconsciously, driven by other people's expectations and society's demands, to living consciously, guided by your own values and inner truth. It's not selfish. It's necessary. It's not about becoming isolated or uncaring. It's about becoming grounded in yourself so you can show up authentically in your relationships, so you can love from wholeness rather than emptiness. Because you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot love others authentically if you're constantly betraying yourself. You cannot be truly present with others if you're always performing for them, always calculating how to be acceptable to them. The shadow work isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. It's about integrating the parts of yourself you've rejected, not because they're bad, but because you were taught they were unacceptable, so you can show up whole. What would you do differently if you knew you were already enough, exactly as you are? What would you stop doing? What would you start doing? What would you give yourself permission to want? When you stop performing, you start living. When you stop seeking external validation, you find internal peace. When you stop trying to control how others see you, you start to see yourself clearly for the first time. And paradoxically, when you stop trying so hard to be loved, love finds you more easily. Not the conditional love that depends on your performance, but the kind of love that sees you and chooses you anyway. Because authentic people attract authentic connections. When you show up as yourself, you give others permission to do the same. And that's where real intimacy begins. Not in the meeting of two masks, but in the recognition of two souls. Letting go is not weakness. It's not failure. It's not apathy or coldness or giving up on connection with others. Letting go is the art of remembering who you were before you learned you needed to perform to be loved. Before you learned that love was conditional. Before you learned that you had to earn your place in the world. It's the decision to value peace over popularity, presence over perfection, truth over approval, your own inner knowing over the opinions of people who don't really know you, who aren't invested in your growth, who benefit from your smallness. Because at the end of the day, what matters more than being liked by everyone is being able to live with yourself. What matters more than fitting in everywhere is belonging to yourself first. And when you're real, when you're grounded in your own truth, when you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others, you attract the kind of life you don't have to beg for. Carl Jung didn't teach us to suppress our shadows or to become perfect versions of ourselves. He understood that perfection is the enemy of authenticity, that wholeness requires integration, not elimination. He taught us to recognize our shadows, the rejected, hidden, denied parts of ourselves, not with shame, but with mercy, with curiosity, with the understanding that these rejected parts often contain our greatest gifts, our deepest wisdom, our most authentic power. Shadow work isn't about digging into darkness for the sake of it. It's about giving light to the parts of you that were banished just for being honest, just for having needs, just for taking up space, just for being human in a world that often demands perfection. The persona served a purpose. It protected you when you were young and vulnerable and dependent on others for survival. But you're not that child anymore. You have the capacity now to be both kind and honest, both loving and boundaried, both connected to others and loyal to yourself. You can care deeply without losing yourself. You can love without performing. You can be generous without depleting yourself. You can be supportive without enabling. You can be present without sacrificing your own needs on the altar of other people's comfort. Clarity doesn't come from fixing the world or managing everyone's opinions of you. It comes from finally turning around and facing the voice inside you that you've silenced the longest. That voice that says, what about what I want? What about what I feel? What about what I need? What about what matters to me? What about my dreams, my hopes, my fears, my authentic self? That's not your ego talking. That's not selfishness or narcissism or any of the labels you've been taught to fear. That's your soul asking to be remembered. That's the part of you that knows who you are underneath all the conditioning and expectations and inherited patterns. So if you're tired of over-explaining, of performing, of proving you're worth loving, of making yourself small for other people's comfort, of living a life that doesn't feel like yours, try this. Don't text them again when they don't respond. Don't check how your post is doing every 5 minutes. Don't rehearse your next sentence to make sure it's perfect, acceptable, unlikely to offend or challenge or inconvenience anyone. Just stop. Let go, even a little, even for a day, even for an hour, and watch what happens. Maybe for the first time in years, you'll realize you were never too much. You were just too edited, too compressed, too afraid of taking up the space you naturally occupy as a human being with thoughts and feelings and needs that matter. When you stop caring like the old you, the you that needed constant validation, constant approval, constant reassurance that you were acceptable, everything begins to change. Not because you become cold or disconnected, but because you become connected to what actually matters. Your values, your truth, your peace, your authentic relationships, your genuine interests, your real life, not the performance of your life, but your actual, messy, beautiful, imperfect, real life. You stop living for the applause and start living for the quiet satisfaction of being aligned with yourself. You stop seeking validation from people who don't really see you and start trusting your own judgment, your own instincts, your own inner compass that has been waiting patiently for you to remember how to listen to it. You stop performing love and start feeling it, genuinely, deeply, starting with the love you owe yourself, the acceptance you've been seeking everywhere except within. If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're ready to explore your own shadow work and individuation journey, there are resources in the description to help you begin that process. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. The individuation process isn't a destination. It's a way of living. It's choosing authenticity over acceptance, truth over comfort, growth over safety, yourself over the version of yourself that everyone else prefers because it's easier, more convenient, less challenging. It's messy and imperfect and deeply human. It doesn't mean you'll never care what others think, but it means their opinions won't determine your worth. It doesn't mean you'll never people please, but it means you'll catch yourself sooner and course correct faster. It means you'll start to trust that you're worth knowing, that your thoughts matter, that your feelings are valid, that your needs are legitimate, that your presence is a gift, not a burden, that you deserve love not because of what you do, but because of who you are. But it's yours, your life, your truth, your journey home to yourself, your path back to the person you were before the world told you that you needed to be different to be acceptable. And when you finally stop caring what everyone else thinks, you start caring about what actually matters. Your peace, your truth, your authentic relationships, your genuine interests, your real contributions to the world. Your life, not the performance of your life, not the Instagram version of your life, but your actual day-to-day, moment-to-moment real life. Because now you're finally home, not to a place, but to yourself, to the person you were before you learned you needed to be different to be loved, to the self that was always there, waiting patiently beneath all the masks and performances and attempts to be acceptable. And that home, no one can ever take it away from you. No rejection can destroy it. No criticism can diminish it. No disapproval can make it less real. The person you've been looking for, the acceptance you've been seeking, the love you've been chasing in all the wrong places, it was never out there. It was always here, waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself and come back. Welcome home, to yourself, to your truth, to your authentic life, to the peace that comes from finally being real.